The 28th Regiment,
the 28th Marine Regiment.
5th Marines.
5th Marine Division.
Okay.
Right.
What I want to do, Nick, is we got about 30, 35 minutes here, but I just would like to just really kind of go back and just, we're going to be just focusing on Iwo Jima today, okay? That's
Right.
the main part of my film. And what I'd like to ask you first is, what do you remember about the night before the landing? Where were you the night before? And give me some of your thoughts you had at that time.
All right. The night before the landing, of course, we were aboard transport ship, and we didn't get much sleep that night, which is understandable. Most of us stayed up either chatting or playing cards, anything to while the time away. And we got up, of course, before dawn, to get prepared, and we had a very early breakfast, which was a joy because we never had steak and eggs before, other than during my first tour overseas, just before we go into an assault. Why, that seemed to be the standard fare: eggs and steak. So it was almost like a repeat, and almost you get a feeling as though the condemned man is having his last meal. So anyway, after breakfast, we got all our gear together and went topside, waiting for the order to go down climb down the cargo nets.
Tell me that process of going down those nets. Did they call your name, or how did you know when?
No, by unit.
Okay.
By unit. Yeah, they call us by unit, and going down the cargo plane into the landing craft. It was a little shaky because those cargo nets are not the most stable ladder to climb down, and with the landing craft bobbing up and down, it was a little bit of a chore, and a couple of guys actually missed the landing craft and landed in the water. Of course, there were enough Navy people around hovering so that they were able to recover them pretty quick, because they had a lot of equipment on their backs besides their weapons.
Sure.
And it turned out to be just about dawn when we were climbing down, and it turned out to be the most beautiful morning you can imagine. Blue skies, the sun so nice and bright, and then as the sun came up, then looming out in the water was our target, Iwo. And it was just all smoke, all ablaze, and we could see our bombers taking their runs, and you could see the explosions of their bombs, and of course the Navy ships, the gun ships offshore, while they were also laying down their last barrage, I guess you could call it. So that prepared us as we sailed in to the shore. I happened to be in the second wave to go in, and it was somewhat of a well, maybe today you might refer to it as a traumatic experience, to find what was waiting for us on the beach itself. We were, and I'm not saying that the Navy intelligence was at fault, because the intelligence that was given us, and certainly to my unit, because we had equipment that we had to take ashore with, communication equipment. And the fact that the intelligence report said that, revealed that this was a rocky shore, and you could use jeeps and we put on most of our equipment on the Jeeps in separate landing crafts. So when we landed, we found that that was not the case. I'm inclined to conclude today that, and I know the Japanese knew we were coming, and they were ready, and they got prepared. And I think what they did was they used some equipment, Caterpillar or whatever, to bring down the ash and piled it up right at the shoreline to impede our progress. But of course, what happened was that all the equipment could not climb the Jeeps. There was no way they could go up that ash sand dune. But naturally, my unit was real concerned because we had a job to do to take the telephone equipment to the command post that was designated to set up communication immediately between the advancing first assault and also our command post. And there was no way we could stay on the beach because what had happened was one Navy individual who's known as the beach master, he rides parallel to the shore saying what's happening, and with his bullhorn he was yelling, "Get the hell off the beach." But because I told our commanding officer, our equipment is here, he said, "Get the hell off the beach," which we did because what had happened was so prepared the Japs were for our assault, knew when we were coming, what we were coming with, and also where the units were going to be. So my 28th Regiment, their job was the assault of Suribachi. Get that as soon as possible and secure it because that was the high ground.
Yeah.
We wanted that. The CO wanted that. The whole operation rested to a great degree on securing and getting the high ground of Suribachi, also known as Hot Rocks. But anyway, we did go inland as far as we could go and set up our command post, but we needed the equipment. So what my unit had to do, they had no choice alternative. We took our packs off and unloaded what we were carrying, and in teams cut back to the beach and empty the Jeeps and bring the equipment back and forth in shuttle form. And that was kind of sad. I mean, difficult, I would say, yes. Sad to some degree because as we were going back for our equipment, stretchers were coming down the sand ash dune with the early wounded already. So it was pretty much a nightmare as to what was happening. But little by little, we got our equipment back up to our command post and set up our telephones and sent out the crews with the telephone lines. And all we could do was just lay the lines on the ground to the advancing units and give them telephones, and then at least we had some contact with the command post. But unlike the Solomons campaign, where we had coconut trees, where we were able to put our lines overhead, our lines on Iwo just had to be on the ground. There were no trees. So of course what had happened, it exacerbated the problem by equipment shearing the lines and cutting the lines, which meant take another line, run it down on top of the other one. There's no way of repairing at that point. So there was a lot of wire that was laying on the ground in Iwo.
Let me go back now. What was the mood of the troops going in? You went in a Higgins boat?
Yes, yeah.
So when you're riding to shore that morning, what are you thinking of? This is going to be an easy operation? Or are you afraid of getting killed, or what?
Well, I'll tell you, the fact that we were somewhat seasoned because being in the former paratroopers, and the paratroopers were the nucleus for the 5th Division and the 28th Regiment. So a lot of my old friends we were still together. And I guess one of my thoughts at the time was, what are my percentages? Got through fine during the first tour. You know, are we pushing percentages, at this point? But the fact that the island was really aflame and a smoke, didn't feel as though it was going to be too difficult. Because, I know the bombing that took place, we were aware of days ahead of time. But of course, we had no idea as to how honeycombed and the time that was spent by the Japanese, because they were so long there, that they had a lot of people underground, and they were just not susceptible to heavy bombing, artillery or whatever from the ships. So initially, we didn't feel as though it was going to be that bad, even to the point that the operation that I was involved in with Suribachi, this was to be, and in fact, the island was considered to be a 72-hour operation and more a baptism of fire for the replacements that had joined us. But of course, it turned out to be not a 72 operation, because the introduction to battle for the replacements was a prelude. Our unit, the division, and the 3rd and the 4th to go to the main units to go to Okinawa. But of course, it turned out that the battle for Iwo Jima was not a 72-hour operation, and we had to commit our entire units just to secure the island. Excuse
Let me
me.
change my tape. Hold on. That hard? I mean, you're a young man. You said you're seasoned, but still, seeing the casualties and the wounded and the dead. I mean, how do you
Well,
focus on what
of course,
you're
I had seen them before
doing?
in the Solomons,
Yeah.
so that part of it was not strange or new to me. Not that you ever get used to it, but it didn't strike me as difficult as it did strike the new men who were exposed to this for the first time.
Were you able to talk? I mean, when you went in on that landing craft, were the all veterans on that landing craft? You'd all been in battle before, pretty much, on that Higgins boat, so all you guys knew what to expect.
I'm sorry.
Okay. When you went in on the
Yeah.
Higgins boat,
Right.
were you all veterans on that Higgins boat?
No.
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 So
I would
what-
say in the Higgins boat there probably was perhaps 30 of us.
Okay.
I would say that maybe 4 or 5, maybe a half a dozen were former paratroopers and
Okay.
old timers.
But
Old timers at 22.
okay. So when you landed, had the Japanese started shooting yet?
Immediately.
Okay, so tell me about the landing. What you remember and what you saw.
Yeah, well, all I remember at the time of the landing was as soon as the ramp was lowered, we could see the sand, the ash dune sloped up so high, and hunkered down were the members of the first assault, first wave, and they were still climbing up, trying to go over because it was like you go 2 steps forward and then you just slide back. It was very hard, difficult going. So seeing them still there was a little bit, I wouldn't say eye-awakening, but of concern, because they were not supposed to be there. They were supposed to have been going inland to the command post for the next maneuver. And then, excuse me, there was some equipment that was still on the beach. And of course, there was even some rusted old craft, Japanese craft, that were lying there also. But as soon as we landed, the mortars started landing from Suribachi, because they were prepared, like I said earlier, and they knew the exact distances they needed to drop those mortars into where we were. So that was one of the reasons that Beachmaster would say, "Get the hell off that, get off of that beach. Don't wait for anything." So that's what we did.
Now, were you armed? What kind of weapon did you have when you landed?
Excuse me, the communication crews, we had M1 carbines, and I had a sidearm because I happened to be a considered NCO corporal, and NCOs were the ones that usually carried sidearms. But most of my unit, the crews had carbines, whereas the others had their M1s and rifles and the BARs, Browning automatic rifles. But in addition to our regular equipment and pack, we had our telephone equipment. I had to carry the telephones, and the rest of my crew were usually another 2 men who would handle the reel of wire on a spindle. So we had all of that equipment to contend with. And it was the reason we had less armament than the regular linemen or grunts was because of the fact that we had other equipment that we had to take with us. We had small chest reels of wire, a very small gauge, but for a temporary hookup, it was fine. Our main heavy gauge reels of wire were on the Jeeps.
Let me ask you a question. This may sound kind of silly, but when you're in combat and they're shooting mortars and artillery and whatever they're shooting, the machine gun fire, how do you feel during that? Are you scared to death? Are you just waiting to get hit? Did people around you get hit? What's going on?
Well,
describe the combat to me.
I would say in my case, whereby we had a specific assignment, other than, well, of course, the enemy is always in your mind, but we had specific jobs to do, and it was specifically established immediately communications between our commanding officer at our command post with the advancing units heading towards Suribachi. And having that really in mind, it helped to a great degree not completely forget what was going on around you, all the firing from both sides. But that helped. in taking care of the job that we had to. I'd say the most traumatic experience for us as communications people and telephone people who were establishing telephone communication between the units was when you had to go out either with somebody else if you had the men, or you had to go out by yourself to repair a line, try to find what's wrong with the line, shorted or open. Then the exposure kind of set in, and you felt as though somebody was who was taking a beat on you, and more so, I guess, when after Suribachi was secured, and then my unit swung around to the north end of the island and joined the 27th and the 26th and the 4th Division, who had secured the landing strip. At that point, the word got back to quartermaster, also made the Navy supply people conscious. Word got back to quartermaster and also made the Navy supply people conscious of the fact that all the wire that's been laid down is lying on the ground, and we need something to improvise in order to get some wire elevated. So first thing they did was they brought ashore 2x4s and enough nails so that they could be nailed together. So you ended up with a 4x4 pole, and secured wire at one end and then raised that 2x4 extension, and then with 4 guide wires, that was our telephone pole. And then later on, they brought pipe, same length, but the same principle again. Tie it up on top, raise it, guide wires. Now, until that happened, there were always problems on the lines, and you had your crews and individual going out repairing or laying a new one, as I said earlier. And we were able, because in addition to all our regular equipment, all the telephone line people had their belt for climbing and their gaffs for climbing trees and securing yourself, and then doing your necessary connection with the wires. Well, we struggled, but we were able to climb up on those 4x4s and secured our safety belt twice because of the 4x4, not a big tree, that we were able to take care of wire now that was above ground. But being above ground like that, about 8 feet, you felt exposed. You had that eerie feeling, is somebody got his bead on you? But thank the Lord, I came through it. Some didn't, but I did.
Why, I guess that's one of my questions. Why do you think you made it through it?
In all candor, at the time, I really didn't know. And the fact that so many of my old friends and new ones didn't make it, sure, it entered my mind, well, why not me? After all, I considered myself an old timer, and I thought I've been through a lot between my first tour and this one. Uh, it was a little later on in retrospect that I felt that the Lord just had other plans for me. And as my life has continued and different events that have taken place, I can almost relate to the fact that I was here at that time, for a purpose, and a purpose that has been fulfilled at times. So that had a tendency to sink in a little bit later on.
What was the worst thing you think you saw on that island?
I think the worst thing that I saw was the number of wounded Marines who had received initial attention from the corpsmen, which there isn't enough, I can say, for the medical people, the corpsmen of the Navy that are attached to our units, because they're right there in the front lines with us, and the attention that they gave. And of course, they give immediate attention. And then, of course, they tag the people, and the wounded couldn't do anything but stay where they were. And on one occasion, for me, it was very, very traumatic. I had occasion to go out to check a line that was on the ground. This was before Suribachi was secured. And as I was running, checking the line, as I was going along, I passed a crater, a hole made by either mortar or some kind of a shell. And I didn't know them, two of my Marine buddies, I consider them all my buddies. Two of them were sitting there. Both had been wounded, both had been tagged, and just waiting now for stretchers to come. And I gave them both a cigarette, and then I continued on to my job, and found my problem, and then I came back on the same line. When I came back on the same line, they were still there, but they were no longer alive at that point. There was just so much time involved. That time element was enough that they just didn't recover, either bled to death or whatever. But I think that was the saddest time for me, even though I didn't know them personally.
You think it's your faith in God that got you through those times? I mean, how did you rationalize what was going on?
It was really later on in life where I really developed an appreciation of my Lord. At the time, no, and at my age, I just considered myself being invincible, and anything I did it on my own. Nobody else was getting credit. The only credit that I gave to anybody was the Marine Corps. I still feel the same way, that being reduced to nothing at the beginning of our training, and then brought along, and they created the person that they wanted, that it stood me in good stead during all my experience that I was subjected to. So there's no better outfit that will prepare you, not putting down the Army, but there's no better outfit that'll prepare you to have a better chance to survive, because one element of that survival involves the attitude of your buddy. You may not know it, but he's looking out for you too. And we did look out for each other. And I think that's, but to go back to your question about when did I realize, it was sometime later as a civilian that I began to try to determine, why did I come back? And I was searching, and I went to a friend invited me to a Christian men's breakfast, and kind of opened my eyes a little bit, at least to make me curious enough to get into it a little bit deeper with a Bible study that I attended. Then I was able to relate, and I became very close to the Lord at that time. And then I said, whatever I did was not my own doing. It was somebody else who was in charge. And I think that's what, and that's the way I got through it all.
Tell me about Mount Suribachi and the assault on that and how bad that was.
That was the difficulty about Suribachi was the combination of equipment not catching up or being with the advancing troops and establishing that communications I mentioned earlier, but the elevation and the high ground and how honeycombed and the tunnels that were built by the Japanese over many years, guns emplacements hidden, that it was a tough job for the linemen to really secure, and it couldn't have been done without. We were bogged down. It couldn't have been done until they brought some artillery ashore and started pounding Suribachi again with our artillery. And we had established forward posts, outposts with telephones and able to communicate back and forth with the artillery people. And then things quieted down. You would think you're almost secure, but not quite, because then they started coming out of those caves, and it was foot by foot climbing to get up there. Finally, of course, they did get to the top, secured it, although still there were embedded, scattered Japanese in the tunnels. But they were done piecemeal, and mopping up operations took care of that.
You said they came out. Did they physically come out and fight, or were you just talking about they were shooting from out of the?
No, they actually came out physically, but they also had a track system in order the large cave. They had a track system that they were able to roll out equipment, and of course you couldn't see it by the naked eye or observation, but yeah, they were brought out. Once they were brought out, they were doing a lot of damage, but you had the opportunity to know where they were. So concentrated mortar and artillery fire, of course, we prevailed in that respect. So it was just a question of time. No question about the outcome.
Did they come out with hand-to-hand combat tactics? Is that what you're saying? I'm just
The-
imagining this while you're telling me this.
There were some remnants that did that. Not too much as we were going up. There was more hand-to-hand combat after Suribachi was secured and we were heading up the north end of the island. And
Now, are you seeing this, or are you partaking in this at the same time? Are you just watching this happen, or what? Are you right there in the midst of it?
the only thing that I really consciously observed, because we were busy. I mean, busy taking care of the communications setup. Excuse me. And the only thing I did see was the flag raising, because I happened to have a telephone hookup for Commander Colonel, not Butterfield. I forget his name now. But anyway, the colonel had wanted to hook up with regimental headquarters or command post, and we hooked up the line, gave him the telephone, and he was announcing back to regimental headquarters about looking up on top. The flag was raised, right? And of course that was the first flag raising. You know, there's a little bit of a controversy there, but excuse me, that I really observed, because I stopped doing what I was doing, or I finished doing what I was doing. Excuse me.
How did that make you feel as an American and as a
Oh,
member of the Marines when you saw that?
I remember getting a real thrill out of it. A real thrill. A fulfillment of some kind that, hey, we accomplished what we started out to do. Of course, we didn't know what was waiting for us after that.
So it's not like you see in the John Wayne movies going up Suribachi, is it?
Oh, no, you know, Hollywood always takes a little bit of, the license, but it was still an exciting movie. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, a couple of the original flag raisers of the second photo, or the second raising, were in that movie. There were three of them. Three of the guys, Ira Hayes and John Bradley.
Yeah, Ira Hayes was the only one that I knew of the group. I had heard of the others, Gagnon and
Bradley, wasn't Bradley the other guy?
but Ira Hayes, he was with us before, so he was former paratrooper, so I knew him. We had some Navajos in our communications system, because we did use Navajos for audio conversations between units, which I think they made a movie about the Wind Talkers. You know, and there was a lot of truth in that.
Does it seem like 60 years ago, Nick? I mean, does it seem like it's been 60 years, or was it kind of like yesterday?
In retrospect, no. Having gone on with life, now that we're here talking about it, yeah, it does seem like 60 years ago.
Do you think society is forgetting about World War II as a whole? Do you think we've forgotten about it or forgetting?
I think there is that condition, if you will, taking place. My attitude is, I don't want the younger generation or the newer people to know about the gory details. I guess that, other than to know that no question about how destructive war can be, not only to a country but individuals as such. But just remember of just what took place and what significance it had in the perpetuation or the continuation of our country's history. If we accomplish that, or they accomplish that, I think we've been pretty well served, really.
Well, what is, this kind of leads me into another question. What does freedom mean to you in light of World War II and being a veteran? What does freedom mean to you?
Well, to me, freedom means America. I don't think there's any better description that you can give as to what America means, and the freedoms that we enjoy, have enjoyed, will enjoy. I just hope the younger generation coming behind us, because I think, trying to think of who said it, it's the generation behind us that will be the future leaders in the next generation. So they will be having a big influence in the country, in things in general, and what will be taking place. So,
what about the price for freedom? I mean, what would you even tell a young person today about the price for freedom, the fact that it's not free? I mean,
I think off the top of my head, as far as any price is concerned, there really isn't any so-called sacrifice. I don't consider what we were involved in as a sacrifice. I think I'm inclined to think that it was more taking on responsibilities under the circumstances that we were confronted with at the time. And I think for young people, do the same thing. Excuse me. Are responsible, recognize their responsibilities, and live with the consequences, of course, by virtue of whatever has been instilled in their minds. If they can, I guess, if they can handle that combination, I think we as a country, we as a world, I think, will really have progressed to a great degree. I think as a rather funny, a funny note, we were talking about how old and birthdays. It just so happened that my birthday is on March the 5th, and we landed on the 19th. So it was almost 10 days later or so, when we were advancing to the north, that we were having a rest period, and we came off the lines. Somebody else was filling in. So we had a chance to rest a little bit, and we got those brand new rations that had come out at that time. Not the old C, but the new ones. And boy, they had some pretty good stuff. Canned bacon, canned scrambled eggs and stuff. Always had the beans, of course, the old standby. But it was good eating. And on my birthday, we were relaxing, and one of my buddies who knew I liked bacon, he gave me his can of bacon. So as I was opening up the can of bacon, I slit my thumb. And I can honestly, with tongue in cheek, say that I left blood on the sand at Iwo Jima. It just bled. It bled so much that I had to get a corpsman to take me to the medical tent, and they put a couple of stitches in it, but not worthy of a Purple Heart. that's for sure. Excuse me.
You spent 36 days on the island.
30, trying to think, D-36, yeah, that was about the time we were relieved. And a sad incident happened when we were relieved by Army at the north end after this, considering everything secured. Most of the mopping up was done. And we were just getting ready to head back to the south end towards Surbachu, where our, we were to embark and get back on ship. In back of us, near the either the first or the second airport, the third had not been completed. That about 100, 125, from what I've heard, in Japanese came out of caves, banded together. All they could have done, or hoped to do, was do as much damage as they could, because there's no way that they were going to come out of it alive. What they did was they went as a group down to the bivouac area near the airport, where at that point Army planes had flown in, the fighters, some bombers, and pilots were asleep in their tents. A number of them were killed by the Japanese. The CBs, construction battalion from with the Navy, another group you can't say enough about enough about, super people. Excuse me. It was they primarily who had to repel this last group of Japanese, which they did, but we lost a number of people. I don't know, 14 or 50. Oh, no, when I think of 14, only because in our division there were 14 men who received the Medal of Honor, and for that many in a division gives a pretty good indication as to there was a lot of over and above incidents that had taken place. And if I recall correctly, only 4 of the 14 came out alive. The others were killed on Iwo, including, of all people, a guy by the name of John Basilone. I don't know if you heard of him or not. He was a Medal of Honor from our first tour overseas. And I guess Johnny had a reputation to live up to. And typical Basilone, he was right out there in front when the 4th hit. And he didn't make it. It was kind of sad. But that was the percentages were against them.
Well, I read that he could have taken another position, but he wanted to stay as
Oh
the
my
gunny
goodness.
sergeant.
Oh, he had,
Sergeant.
yeah, but the same way with Ira Hayes. He had the same opportunity. And of course, the fact that he was one of the flag raisers, the order came down as we were sailing back to Hawaii that take him and anybody else who was involved in that. And I think we were a beam of either Saipan or Guam. Involved in that flag raising, and I think we were a beam of either Saipan or Guam. But anyway, ship came out, took him, and brought him home to the state, and got him involved in the publicity, raising bonds, rallies, and one thing and the other. Well, he was just exposed to too much. He really was. He couldn't handle that. He was not that great Marine, but not sophisticated enough, I think, to handle that kind of publicity and exposure. So, of course, as everybody knows, he started drinking, overdid it, couldn't handle it, and had a rather tragic,
Yeah, no.
tragic ending.
So, you pretty much have covered what I was hoping to hear about, and you're obviously, your pride in the Marines to this day is strong.
No question.
And I like what you said about their training, and I had the Brigadier General at 29 Palms in California call me before
Uh-huh.
I came out here,
Right.
and he's real interested in this work, so he'll see this someday. But I appreciate what you shared there about the Marines too in the 5th Division. What can you say?
Oh, as an individual, I'm, real proud. Yeah, they say once a Marine, always a Marine. I think it's very true, very true. That's why we have empathy for one another, knowing what they went through, the same thing that I went through. So there's a lot of common ground there. I had my eldest grandson, he was 24 at the time, but he mentioned to his mother that he thought he'd join the Marine Corps. So his mother told him, "You better call up Grandpa and talk to him first." And I talked to him. I told him about the Marine Corps, and I said, "I'm not going to be too encouraging." I said, because 4 years ago, 5 years ago, there was no war going on. And I said, the fact that there isn't, I'd rather you continue your schooling and finish college as your priority and forget about the Marine Corps. But I said, if there happens to have hostilities break out and the country is at war, I said that would be the outfit to join for the same reasons I gave earlier, that your chances of survival depending on your education and where you're situated. But regardless of your rank, whatever, your initial training in boot camp is the same for everybody. In fact, I had a chaplain that went through with, went through with me, Father Bradley from New York. And he also went through parachute training and jump school with us. And he was just a regular guy. He had to take care of everything. So rank means nothing. But if you do have the knowledge, intelligence, and capability to fill in a particular spot, they're not going to make a rifleman out of you, all things being equal. So anyway, I discouraged from joining.
I got one more question about on the wounded on the island. You mentioned those 2 fellows that didn't make it. I mean, were there opportunities where you did help somebody or could help somebody that was wounded? Or you just doing your job, they tell you not to do anything about that?
Not really. Physically, to help somebody that was in dire straits, no. Like in the case of those two Marines I mentioned earlier that I had passed going out, my main concern and priority was I had a job to do. Somebody else is waiting to be hooked up with the command post, and that priority, that had a lot to do with survival of other people. So that was my first priority, to take care of that. But no, to answer your question, anybody physically carried on my back or anything like that.
Wipe your nose. You got a piece of tissue by your nose.
Huh?
There you go.
Excuse me.
One more question about the island. Again, I don't know. Did you see? I'd like to find a chaplain that was at Iwo Jima. I haven't found anybody yet. But did you, or a minister? Did you see anybody like administering last rites to any of those guys, or did you see anything like that going on?
No,
Okay.
nobody, of course, there were services held after, after Suribachi was secured, and as we were heading north, there were, and I've got, I think, a picture of two services, one a Catholic and the other Protestant. I don't think it gives the name of the chaplain at that time. Excuse me. No.
Well, that's good. I'm going to ask you to do one more thing for me, if you would. At the end of my interviews, I'm asking the men if they would give me a salute into the camera. Can I ask you to do that too?
Oh, sure.
Okay. I want you to look right into the camera, and I'll just have you do a salute. And then just hold it. Go ahead. Go ahead, Nick. Okay, great. Thank you. All right.
Appreciate it.